Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Broadband News. So the Commerce Department has issued a 90-day extension to states to get in their final proposal for BEAD. This is due to the review that's going on right now. I'll be right back with more. Hey, thanks for joining. Rick Husey here with Broadband News. So, I was kind of hoping this would happen, at least that the Commerce Department would do an extension, because I was reporting back a week or two ago, the state of Maine had said that they would not be able to get their BEAD application in on time because of the fact that they were planning on getting it in by the June deadline. So basically the deadline for states was that they needed to get their final proposal in by 365 days or 1 year after their initial proposal was approved by the NTIA. So the initial proposals were later broken up into two pieces of Volume 1 and Volume 2. Some states did Volume 1 and then 2, some kind of put them all together, but all of their states have their two initial proposals, Volume 1 and Volume 2 in, and once that was in and approved by the NTIA, then the clock started on the final proposal. They're supposed to be in within a year. So the NTIA has come out and extended that for 90 days. Now, as I reported again a couple of weeks ago, Maine had said that they had heard it would be mid-May before they received any initial guidance, or the NTIA put out additional guidance based on the review. And when I had contacted the state of Georgia, because we were working on a bid here for a customer of ours, a city here in the state, I had heard the same thing, that they were thinking it would be mid-May before they were announcing the initial preliminary awards, because they wanted to make sure there was no guidance that would impact those awards. So I'm hoping that the 90 days doesn't mean we're looking at another 90 days. I'm hoping that just means that, hey, we realize we've been looking at this for a while and we're going to be a little bit longer. So we're going to give all of the states 90 days on, in addition to the 1 year that they can get in their final proposal. So I'm still hoping that we're looking now at still mid-May, a mid-May time frame for when the NTIA releases any initial guidance. And I'm still hoping that it's not going to be a big change as far as the technology goes. I'm hoping that it's going to be limited to some of the things that were not in the original Infrastructure Act about environmental issues, about workforce requirements, those kinds of things that were not in the act that were put in by the Biden administration, that are kind of onerous for the states and certainly the service providers to implement, and really don't have anything to do with broadband. As far as getting broadband to everybody, and actually would increase the cost of getting the broadband to everybody when you start throwing all this other stuff on top of it. So I'm hoping that it's related to that, and I'm hoping that there are good technology folks that know the internet, know broadband, that are speaking with the Secretary Lutnick and anybody else that's working for him on this, and that he's seeking out the guidance of those people that understand broadband, understand fiber optics versus satellite and the capabilities of that, especially moving into the future. Because even now, satellite broadband, you're lucky if you can get a gig down. I was thinking it was really slow. It's not that slow. So it's actually good service. If you're stuck in an area where you can't get broadband service, satellite's great as far as low Earth orbit satellite from Starlink. Amazon Kuiper is coming out with something similar. So it's great to have that available in these areas where you can't get access. And it's great to have it available as an alternative technology in BEAD, and I thought it was handled perfectly in BEAD, as far as that is not considered reliable broadband. It is reliable, but it's not considered reliable broadband from the perspective of the BEAD program, because it's not as future-proof, it's not as fast. So there are reasons for that, and I think it was handled well within the BEAD program, but I'm hoping they don't change that. So let's read through this. I was also going to show a video of Howard Lutnick when he was in his Senate confirmation hearing as to why people are concerned about what he's doing. Anywhere from they're going to maybe change the threshold where it will force more states to have to use satellite, or even just requiring states to use satellite. So there's a spectrum of what people are thinking. I'm hoping they're not going to touch that at all. I'm hoping they look at the legislation and the notice of funding opportunity and compare them, and realize that the legislation does have a preference for fiber. And I linked to this document that we're going to look at, as well as a YouTube short that I did that was a shorter version of a longer video I did that talks about The fact that if you look in the Act itself, in the BEAD program or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and you look at how they describe reliable broadband service and priority broadband projects, if you look at that language, it is absolutely talking about fiber. It doesn't specifically say fiber optics, but it is talking about fiber when you look at how they define what that should be. So they didn't specifically call it fiber, come out and say fiber, but it's definitely not satellite when you look at what they're saying about it. And certainly fiber is the one that meets the standards that they're talking about there. So I did link to that as well. So let's take a quick look at this. So you see here NTIA action notice of programmatic waiver. The BEAD program provides $42.45 billion to achieve high-speed internet coverage throughout the United States. The U.S. Department of Commerce, in keeping with its mission to create the conditions for economic growth and opportunity for all communities, is currently undertaking a detailed review of the BEAD program to remove unnecessary rules and mandates, to improve efficiency, take a more technology-neutral approach, cut necessary red tape, and streamline deployment. So the concerning one there is a more technology-neutral approach, because really, again, if you read the language in the Act, it's technology neutral, but it's got a preference for fiber, because it wouldn't make any sense for us to put something in that's inferior just because it costs less. Because the whole point of this exercise, of what we're trying to accomplish here, is to be able to get everyone in the United States, every location that should be able to get broadband, hopefully get them fiber optic technology. Fiber optics will take them well into the future. And if you can't, if there's not enough money, then it leaves the door open for alternative technologies. And it doesn't say you can't use satellite, and it doesn't say you can't use fixed wireless that's unlicensed. In fact, the NTIA under the Biden administration came out with guidance on how they could use satellite. So, because it's a very different technology, right? It's just already up there, circling overhead. It's not like you have to deploy new infrastructure. You might have to launch more satellites to cover more people or to be able to provide higher bandwidth. But again, it's up there already. So it's different on how you might fund something like that versus, let's say, a telephone company or a cable company or other provider going out and having to trench to put in fiber optic lines and all of that, and last mile hookups, those kinds of things. Where it's satellite, it's up there. You get a terminal, put it at your house, and you got it, right? So there was some guidance given on that, but satellite is definitely not where we want to be. So that's this part here about technology neutral approach. I'm concerned about that. The other things, unnecessary red tape. Yeah, we don't. Again, that increases the cost. Unnecessary rules and mandates. That's all good and important, and that should be looked at. In anticipation of these forthcoming programmatic changes, and to ensure states and territories have sufficient time to implement them, the NTIA, as the agency responsible for administering the BEAD program, provides herein notice of a programmatic waiver of the final proposal deadline requirements set forth, and it talks about the NOFO there, granting a 90-day extension to all eligible entities. And again, that's 90 days on top of the 365 days that they would have had to get their final proposal in from the time that their initial proposal was approved. It gives a little background here. Here you see the BEAD NOFO requires them to get that in 12 months. Further states that the Assistant Secretary may grant a waiver for the final proposal deadlines. A comprehensive review of the BEAD program is underway, and a policy notice will be issued to improve and streamline the program, necessitating additional time for eligible entities to submit their final proposal to NTIA. Well, there are a couple of final proposals already in and approved, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with those, and it will be interesting to see what changes they make and how that might impact the states. If they have a really heavy hand on this technology neutral idea here, and they decide to change how much of this should be something like satellite or fixed wireless, unlicensed fixed wireless, then that is going to cause states to have to kind of rework some of what they've done. The Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information is one of the 4 territories of the United States. That's who the eligible entities are. They will need additional time to implement the forthcoming programmatic improvements. Therefore, the extraordinary circumstances exist that justify the waiver to extend the state's final proposal deadline, an action that is also in the best interest of the federal government. It talks about the waiver. NTIA hereby waives the BEAD program's requirement that a state submit a final proposal no later than 365 days after the date upon which the prior Assistant Secretary, that would have been Alan Davidson, approved that state's initial proposal. Accordingly, they're granting a 90-day extension to the final proposal deadline. Then at the very bottom, it mentions, just for the sake of clarity, The new final proposal deadline for an eligible entity shall be no later than 455 days after the date upon which the prior secretary approved his initial proposal. So they're just saying, basically laying out the full length there. So again, now I want to play this video from, again, Howard Lutnick. This was from his Senate confirmation. Senator John Thune, who's now the head of the Senate, basically was asking him questions. And he's a Republican, so he was asking questions from a Republican perspective. He didn't mention so much technology neutrality. He was really interested in, are we going to have all this extraneous stuff in here that's got nothing to do with broadband? And are we going to make sure that the money goes to deploying broadband and not something else? So those were his questions. But Howard Lutnick, he covers that, but he also mentions again, there's some phrases in here that are concerning when he talks about, getting the cheapest alternative. And he mentions fiber last when he gives a list of technologies to use. So that's a concern to me. And again, I'm hoping he's got people that are knowledgeable talking to him that are making him understand that we don't want to monkey very much with the way it is. It's set up pretty well right now. So here is Howard Lutnick.
I want to come back quickly to the NTIA,
and this is actually
Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. I didn't vote for the legislation that created this program, but it provided over $42 billion to expand internet access to rural areas. And as you likely know, the program is yet to connect a single household. And the Biden administration included a number of requirements not envisioned by Congress in the program, including climate change mandates, rate regulation, onerous labor requirements, and other concerning items, which is why they haven't signed anybody up. And there isn't a single telecom in South Dakota, which represents and serves a lot of underserved areas, that can use the program because of all these mandates and conditions they put on it. So my question is, will you commit to working with states to remove these requirements so that funds can go to truly unserved areas?
I'm going to work to make sure that Congress gets the benefit of the bargain. You want to get broadband into the hands of low-income people, let's go do it. But let's do it efficiently and let's do it swiftly. Let's use satellites, let's use wireless, and let's use fiber. And let's do it the cheapest, most efficiently we can. And I commit to working with you to make sure the states execute and deliver on the promise that Congress has made.
And will you also work to ensure that this BEAD funding is only used for actual broadband infrastructure builds?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So the cheapest we can is the concerning phrase there, because we can certainly cover everyone with satellite, but that's the last thing that we want to do. As I've mentioned before, satellite is a service that's great. Well, I mentioned it just today, but from the standpoint of the future, satellite will not do what we need. So we're looking 5-10 years down the road, and we would then be realizing that we really need to get fiber optic to these folks that we connected up with satellite. And we're going to need to do that anyway, even under the current program. If they leave it as it is, there are going to be folks that, a few people here and there, a few areas here and there that are using the alternative technology, whether that be fixed wireless or satellite, low Earth orbit satellite, even under the current path that we were going, that eventually we'd need to go, we need to get these guys on fiber now. We need to put a little bit more money towards that, because we couldn't afford it last time because it was just the cost per mile, for example, or per location was just too much. But if we start expanding the number of people that have satellite, then it's going to be a much bigger group of folks that we're going to have to be upgrading in 5 or 10 years. And I'm serious about 5 or 10 years. We've seen how this has gone over the years. When we thought 10 meg by 1 meg was really fast service, that was the definition of broadband at one point, and that was great service. So we were putting in DSL, and it was handling that okay, and then suddenly it's like DSL's not going to cut it. Cable modem service is great up to a point. It can't do symmetrical very easily. You can do it now, but even cable modem DOCSIS service is going to be limited into the future, I believe. And I think cable operators recognize this. They realize that they can keep their customers happy now because they can do pretty good download speeds. They can easily do a gig down, and they can do enough speed generally for most folks on the upstream, even though they can't do symmetrical in a lot of cases. Those that can do symmetrical, they're all going to be limited by speed. Fiber is the one thing that once you get the technology deployed, and let's say fiber optic cables, and then you've got your equipment on both ends. It might take just a swap out of a card to go from 1 gig to 10 gig XGS-PON to 25 gig, and then we're looking at 50 gig and 100 gig into the future. And you're not going to see anything like that on satellite or even cable modem service, certainly not DSL or fixed wireless. So fiber, while it's more expensive, what the state should be doing, and what I think most states are doing, and what I think really what was envisioned for the BEAD program was maximize fiber to the greatest extent that you can. Get fiber. We're giving you a certain amount of money. Okay, take that money, and it was done in a good way. It said, okay, states, we're going to look at how many locations that you have in your state that are unserved compared to the total number of locations in the United States and the territories that are unserved. And we're going to give you a percentage of money based on that. And then you take that money and you determine the best way to cover every single location that you have in your state. And again, if you look at the language in the BEAD program, to preferably do that with priority broadband projects, which would be fiber broadband service, if you read the language in the bill, to get as much fiber as you can. And then once you have gotten all of those folks covered that you can with the priority broadband service, which would be the fiber optics, then you can, and the reliable broadband service, the wired service like that, then you can look at alternative technologies. And the two that are mentioned basically would be satellite service and unlicensed fixed wireless, because those are going to be less reliable. Unlicensed because it's unlicensed. There'll be, maybe some contention there, and it's not like a licensed. It's not like a provider has a license for the service or that's licensed by rule through something like CBRS spectrum. And then you've got satellite, which again is good for what it's worth and where it is best used, which is in very isolated areas, because you have somebody today who can get good internet service. And as I've mentioned in the past, the people that have it are thrilled because they had nothing before. That's why they're thrilled. They won't be thrilled years from now if they're trying to do things then that we can't conceive of now, or maybe we can, and things like virtual reality, augmented reality, those kinds of things. And so they realize that there are more and more people out there on the internet that have fiber that are able to take advantage of new applications that are coming out, and they can't. It's just like the folks that were on 10 meg by 1 meg service in the past. They were happy then. A lot of people had that. A lot of people didn't have that. They were lucky. Maybe they had dial-up, right? So the people who had 10 by 1 broadband service, they were, wow, we're great. People on dial-up were miserable, right? And then the people on 10 by 1 were miserable just a few years later because, again, the applications move on, the technology moves on, but if their broadband service doesn't, then suddenly they are the ones on the short end as far as broadband goes. And satellite's going to be in that condition at some point. And again, it's just going to be, I think, just 5 to 10 years in the future where they're going to need faster service than they have right now. So again, hoping that Howard Lutnick and the folks at the Department of Commerce and the folks at the NTIA are looking at this from that perspective, and that they do not make significant changes to the program as far as the fiber preference, because it really is there. So again, check out that YouTube short that I posted in the comments where I talk about, I actually look at the language in the Infrastructure Act and talk about how it definitely is a fiber preference. And there's a link in there, I think, to the longer video that I did on that talks about satellite as well. So thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. Click the subscribe button if you're not subscribed. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. I'd like that. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.